All right, everybody, it is another Tuesday, and we are here at the MSP Initiative, joined by our friend and longtime channel aficionado, Amy Luby. How you doing, Amy?
Hey, I'm great.
Awesome.
Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate having you. It's been some time. When was the last time I saw you? 2019?
Probably, yeah. I mean, we've all been grounded pretty much all year, right? Almost.
That's true. That's true. Where are you based out of?
I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, born and raised.
Omaha, Nebraska. Wow, population's like what? 200,000 people?
Oh, come on now. About 750,000 in the greater area.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So is there a mask policy necessary?
We were one of the rogue states that never actually did a stay-at-home order. So there were 4 or 5 states that didn't do that. Now, that doesn't mean that we didn't shut things down. We did. We had, I think it was called a health directive, is what our governor called it. So, everything shut down, the restaurants, the bars, social gatherings, parks, all of it. That all shut down for a while. But we've also now been open for a while, and everything is getting back to semi-normal. Um, Restaurants are at 50% capacity, I think, is the rule. Um, Most of the city pools are not opening. There was a big donor who donated money here to open up, I think, 5 or 6 of our pools. So,
Hmm,
you know, we're getting there.
that's interesting. So is like, but you're with Acronis. Your team's based out of Florida?
So our US offices are Boston or Burlington. And then we have a call center and support center in Phoenix, in Arizona.
Okay, so
So,
I,
but
so I know the state's
our,
completely, but that's good.
yeah, well, we're in 33 countries. Our actual global headquarters is, well, dual headquartered in Singapore and Switzerland.
Hmm.
So our CEO is out of Switzerland, and many of our executive team are there as well. Kind of split between Boston and Singapore mostly.
So how has it been trying to make things work with all those people in all of those countries in different locations with different rules and different lockdown procedures and still make things work?
Well, I'm glad I'm not head of HR. That's all I can say. I mean, for me, it hasn't been, yeah, I haven't carried any of that burden. I've just listened to whatever the rules are and follow them. But yeah, we've had to just honor each country, each region, as they've done different things. I started whatever that first Monday in March was, so it hasn't even been that long. I spent a week in Burlington, and on my way home, that's when everything started to really shut down, and travel was shut down, and offices were closed, and all that happened. So, but I've been a remote person for 15, almost 20 years. So, for me, it's nothing incredibly abnormal.
Got it. So, you know, what is your perception on the rest of the year then before we get into the good stuff? I mean, you're in Nebraska, you never shut down, but obviously you're a traveler. You're probably on a plane as much as most people that we talk to on a regular basis when it's not shut down. So, like, what's your gut feel for the rest of the year?
You know, it is so hard for me to gauge. Those people that are, well, first of all, I would love to be on the road. Like, so for me personally, I I really miss it. Um, I obviously see the necessity, I guess, of protecting everybody. So I'm not saying I'm cavalier about it, but boy, I would love to get back to normal if we could. Having said that, I don't think that's going to happen really anytime soon. Um, I know there are events still scheduled for, kind of mid Q3 and Q4. Um, right now, I think it's a probably 60 or 70% chance that they're still going to close.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I mean, it's so hard to predict. Acronis is still we have our annual Cyber Summit, our partner conference every year in Miami in October. Our live event is still going on. It's, now a hybrid event, right? Just like pretty much everybody else. So we do have a virtual component to it. But those that are willing to travel, assuming that Florida, doesn't get shut down again, who knows? I mean, it's nuts, and
So,
it's just unprecedented.
I assume if your event goes on, you will be in Florida.
I will be in Florida. Yes, I will.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
noted. So if anybody wants to track down Amy, circle that on the calendar.
Right.
What's the date of that event?
The 19th through the 21st.
Okay.
So, but
Yeah.
George, the reaction or the answers, if you will, because I own one of the tracks, right? So I'm responsible for filling that content, whatever it is. Um, and I will tell you right now, it's 50-50. There are people who will not travel for any reason whatsoever, regardless of what the region or the state or the government is saying right now. So I'm seeing that. And then the other half are like, yeah, I'll travel. I'm fine with it. Just let me know when and where to be. So it's so very polarized in my experience, with either I won't travel or yeah, I can't wait. Like it doesn't seem like there's any in between,
Sounds
at
like
least
it
for
sounds
me.
like sounds like Major League Baseball since I see you're wearing a Boston Red Sox shirt.
Right. Yeah, it's
It's
my
like
Acronis
it's like
t-shirt.
the players are like, just tell us where and when. We're sick and tired of trying to approve something that doesn't work.
Right.
Should be interesting. Well, that's good. So let's get into cybersecurity. We've had a lot of people on talking about cybersecurity from multiple different angles. I feel like before coronavirus in 2019, coming into Q1, this was the wedge creator, right? This is what you would start with going into the conversation with your existing customer, your potential, prospective customer, right? So this was like the thing to start with. And then coronavirus hit, and I think we pivoted back towards cloud and obviously remote working, and now we're kind of doing like a 360 back to where we started. So um, let's talk about cybersecurity. Put coronavirus aside for a second. I almost want to stop saying the word corona. I feel bad for the beer company. Put coronavirus aside for a second. Talk to me about what was your best advice from a cybersecurity standpoint coming into 2020, and then let's zoom forward after you're done saying that, and let's talk about why we need, what the process is to get back to the position that we're supposed to be in now that we're trying to get through the rest of the year.
Sure. Um, well, the question as it's posed, my advice at the beginning of the year it really hasn't changed. If I were going to be an MSP today, I would be security or cyber protection forward. Like that would be my core deliverable. And whatever tools that I needed would have that centric. I mean, that's where I would be focused. I think the whole pandemic just accelerated that. And you hear folks talking about digital transformation and how it's forced digital transformation. Yeah, whatever you want to call that. No, it is absolutely 100% forced us to become security centric. And if you weren't already, you need to be. And that's what I would have said at the very beginning of 2020. And taking companies that were not working remotely and transitioning them to remote work brought security to the forefront, really for every environment, for every IT department, whether you're an MSP or whether you're a corporate department, it doesn't really matter.
I feel like people skipped that part and just did duct taping for a bit. I really
Well,
did.
I think it kind of had to, except for really, I mean, if you look at the entire ecosystem, right? Whether you're an organization like a company with IT folks, or whether you're a channel organization like an MSP or a systems integrator or whomever, if you look at across the entire ecosystem, MSPs, we've been doing remote work for almost 20 years. So
Yeah.
of any segment in the channel, your MSP is the most mature, if you will, in that model. So 100% ready for it, if you will. Now, other types of channel partners, maybe not as much, simply because they hadn't embraced a remote model. And when I say remote model, meaning the core to the MSP is remote monitoring and management, whatever it is, whether you're still just managing infrastructure, or if you've moved beyond to incorporate full-on security services, or if you're in some special, whatever it is, the core of the model is remotely doing stuff. So we've been looking at remote tools, implementing security across incongruent networks, if you will, or just devices as standalone devices, not necessarily a nice local area network. We've been doing this for almost 20 years. So I wouldn't.
Totally true. Which, by the way, I totally forgot to ask you. So you used to be an MSP, right? Why don't you just give us a quick, history of how Amy gets to her position now at Acronis?
Sure. So, I started out typical MSP. I was a one-man band my first year, crawling under desks, fixing computers, and, creating these networks out of, NT40 devices. That's kind of aging myself. But yeah, I started that. I quickly pivoted into or tried to figure out how I could sustain my organization without the ups and downs of the revenue flux, right, in a break fix model. This wonderful thing came out called Small Business Server, started building a service set around that, delivering Small Business Server and up to 10 devices with it for a flat monthly fee. That's how I started out. So, grew the business
in
from there.
Nebraska?
In Nebraska. I know, dude. We have running water. We've had electricity for at least 10 years, man. Well, I'm kidding. But yeah. So yeah, I did that for almost 16 years. And in the middle of that, actually pivoted my MSP. So at one point, I was a 24/7 shop, help desk knock. We called it hosted services back then. Cloud was not an argument yet. And then I pivoted into one of the first master MSPs. So I actually became a vendor. So that was about the mid 2000s, 2005, 2006 is when I did that. And that was kind of the height of the revolution, right? When everybody was trying to pivot to an MSP model or a recurring revenue model. So that's what we were called, MSP Services Network, and that's what we did. We helped MSPs transition. I had about 1,500 partners that were utilizing our knock and help desk services. So we had about 750,000 devices under management at that time.
Wow, that's still a lot now.
Yeah, it's still a lot now. And at the time, vendors were trying to figure out the recurring revenue model, and they had kind of their legacy, buy a 3-year or a 1-year subscription kind of a thing. We were aggregating vendors as well. So, with the number of devices we had on under management, we could go to those vendors and say, we want better pricing as opposed to an individual MSP. I mean, none of that was, that was just, doing business that way. So we were aggregating licenses, getting price breaks, helping small, 1 to 5 man shops is who my partners were. Deliver 24/7 knock and help desk. And we also had a curriculum. I had peer groups, all of it. So primarily North America, but we had about 150 or so partners in Europe and New Zealand and Australia. So I can spin that and say we were international at the time.
Hey, it counts. Absolutely.
Yeah,
So, wow. So you exited that. I hope you made some money there.
Yeah.
And then
It always sounds glamorous. I got even, I made a little money, got even. But yeah, that was early 2010. I sold MSP Services Network. and then slowly transitioned over to helping distribution and or vendors build their channel programs, specific around the MSP model, really.
Got it. So, wow, that I didn't even know all of that personally, and I've known you for a while. So,
Yeah.
so obviously, you've been through the whole channel chief thing and worked with a few different vendors, and now you're at Acronis. So, let me ask you a question. Then you've lived the more, you know, the graduation of the entire model, right? You went from underneath the desk to you were doing it to you were helping other people do it 10 years later, right? You said you stopped that in 2010 or in 2020. What's changed? Like, has it really fundamentally changed?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. The economics of a recurring revenue model probably hasn't changed. I mean, that is what it is, right? The service set, if you will, has probably been the thing that has morphed the most. Uh, you know, we were making all sorts of progress 15, 20 years ago by providing basic infrastructure support, watching routers, watching utilization on your server, making sure you had enough storage, had some sort of backup in case something really failed. Those were all kind of basic things that's what we were delivering, and that was net new stuff. Today that's table stakes, that's commodity, that's, you have to have some value on top of that. And like I said a little bit earlier in the conversation, you fast forward to today, security is that value add. It is your outcome-based service, which before, I guess if you look at the maturation model, outcome-based deliverables were not really a thing. Reports were a thing. Uptime were a thing, was a thing. But today, it's really more outcome-based services, and that outcome is based on the client. What is that client's need? Are you, servicing a certain type of business in a certain region that has certain unique needs or compliance issues or whatever, whatever it is, those outcomes are your deliverables today, which really is quite a mature model, frankly, compared to where we started.
Well, it's interesting. I was looking at a couple of those. You see a couple of the larger vendors do like the worldwide benchmarking things where they survey everybody that they can and they come out with statistics. I read a few recently, and there's quite a few that still do not have. I mean, most of, like, I would say more, it was like 92% are still very much hybrid, versus you would think everybody's cloud now. It doesn't seem to be the case. And, cloud is a marketing term that evolved during your, 2010, 2000 to 2010 period. So it's very intriguing to me how we get to this outcome-based deliverable, right? Not everybody's taking the same road to get to that place.
Right, right. Well, and that's interesting because we used to argue back in the day, is a pure play MSP the best one, or is a hybrid model the best one? Well, over time, hybrid models proven profitable over 100% recurring revenue. I mean, there's very, very few, and there have always been very, very few MSPs that are 100% recurring revenue. I mean, the only 100% recurring revenue you see out there are folks like Netflix, which that is their model. I've never, and maybe I was doing it wrong, I don't know, but I could not find a profitable way to be 100% services, recurring revenue, without having projects, without selling product. Like, that's a part of the model, and it always has been. I guess unless you're pure play software, a SaaS organization, which that's a different conversation. But for an MSP or someone delivering IT services, there's always going to be that kind of three-legged stool. You're going to have product, you're going to have projects, and you're going to have the retention services, which are generally a subscription model.
So so when you say security, is security a project? Is security a reoccurring service? Is security a product? I mean, it could be any one of the three legs then. So like, how do you envision security from a IT services provider standpoint?
From an MSP standpoint, obviously there's got to be product in there, right? I mean, because you can't really protect a device without utilizing software or tools or, something. So there's gonna be a component there of product plus a deliverable around that, whatever that looks like, whether you're selling outcome-based services or whether you're still kind of selling, I'm going to watch your infrastructure and I'm going to make sure you don't get malware. Like, it could be that quote unquote simple. It's not that simple, but it could be for a start, if you will.
It was, yeah, I just saw on a Facebook group yesterday that somebody asked if anybody had $100,000 in Bitcoin available, or what's the fastest way he could get it, which immediately raised a flag. I was like,
Yeah.
sounds like you got ransomware, man. Probably need to call the insurance company.
A
Obviously,
couple years ago, I actually, there was a little startup company, and I'm not even if I could remember their name, I wouldn't say it. But that was their whole premise, to be, it was like an agent you put it, and they were selling to MSPs, and you put it on the MSPs client networks. If they got ransomware, they would manage paying the ransom. Like that was their deliverable. And I thought,
there's a term for this now. It's called ransomware negotiator.
yeah, I thought it was ridiculous at the time, but I mean, it's a thing. It's literally a thing. I think that what security or what bad actors, if you will, malware, all of it, let's lump it into one big bucket, has done to MSPs is it's taken away the proactive posture that MSPs built their business model on. Okay. Our model was always built on proactive IT services and support, however you want to phrase it. But proactive is key there. And what's happened with the advancement or the proliferation of malware and bad actors and all of this stuff that's going on, it has put us back into a reactive mode. And I think that has been very chaotic for the MSP channel in general. And that's actually why I was so excited to come to Acronis, simply because this platform that Acronis has built actually helps put the average MSP back into a proactive stance when it comes to securing their clients. And I think that's the ultimate goal at this point. 15 years ago, the ultimate goal was to have your PSA and your RMM be your only console, and that was nirvana, right? Work out of one console, manage all the infrastructure stuff.
Single pane, right? Almost
Single pane
never
of glass.
happens, by the way.
What's that?
Almost never happens, by the way. The single pane.
I know it. Well, lots of people have tried. Lots of vendors have tried, right? And it's just not really fully come together. And how can it? I mean, can you have 100% of the core IT services built into one platform? I don't know if you can, you know, and maybe that's not the question to solve for. Maybe that's not it. Maybe it's not about being a better help desk technician or handling more tickets efficiently. Maybe it's not about that. And I'm saying that. I mean, I grew up training partners on how to be more efficient, handling issues and incidents, right? But maybe today that's really not even the question. Maybe the question is, how do I secure these individual devices, period, and get away from this heavy bloated infrastructure that I've built around my MSP, right? Which is
let's zoom out for a second, though. I feel like there's multiple things now, right? The MSP has to protect themselves first. We've seen a lot of MSPs now been the source, or their tools be the root way that their customers got hit. That's very scary. And then the next thing is that there's now this, again, back to this hybrid, right? Some stuff's the endpoint, some stuff's the cloud, some stuff's SaaS. Like, there's multiple vectors now. How do you cover it all? Like, it seems like it's limitless.
Well, your first point, how scary is that MSPs became a target, right?
Very, very, very scary.
But what does that tell us about the MSP channel in general? So if you can hack into an RMM system platform, regardless of the brand, right? What does that tell you about what we as a channel have been doing from a security posture? We are not proactive with it. We're reactive. We've been relying on our backups for 15 years. Clearly, that's not good enough anymore. So, you know, that's one point to make about that. You know, from a how do you solve this problem and cover all vectors? You know, can you ever, like, if if threats are changing instantly and constantly, is there any way to stay on top of it? Or can you just approach it from a layered perspective and cover as many vectors as you can? And can you do that in a way where you can actually see it all happening in real time? Or at least be alerted, if you will, of what's happening in real time. You know, is that possible? Is that the new nirvana?
You need to tell me. I don't know. I'm hearing it from a lot of different ways. I mean, it sounds like from what we've heard so far, especially even people who have come on to the MSP initiative, you know, it's, hey, you almost need to start becoming your own network operate or security operations center, right? And you need to be able to build out that competency in that team. And I feel like a lot of the people on the street are like, I don't even have like the starting position to try and do that internally, right? And I know that there's people out there that do that as a service, which is great because I know a lot of people just don't have the time or even the capability to assemble that on their own. I just, you know, like, to me, there's a double-edged sword here. There's, hey, what is the absolute best practice, and has the bar been raised, right, past UTM and antivirus, which I believe it has. And then on the other side, it's how do I create an offensive strategy so that I can actually deal with stuff as it's happening rather than finding out after the fact. I feel like those are two completely separate bubbles, though.
Well, and I think it's achievable. The problem is, so up until now, if you will, if you just look at historically, what does an MSP do to cover all vectors? Well, we have 7, 8, 9, 10 extra tools today that we didn't use, say, 5 years ago, whatever time frame. You know, up until now, we've had our PSA and our RMM platforms as our core tool sets. We've had AV, we've built our help desk, whether we've outsourced it or not. Same with NOC, email security, right? So we've kind of had these core things that we understood 100%, like managed firewall. We can do that. You know, we understood all that technology. Now you have to add your advanced malware protection, right, on your endpoints. You've got to train your clients on how not to click on things. You have now, you know, the next, one way you could look at it, next evolution of RMM is SIM, right? Because that's literally taking all the stuff that's happening in your logs, looking at it, filtering it, correlating it, and trying to figure out what's happening, right? So you've got that.
It is kind of, I never thought about that. It is, it's almost like the next layer of RMM.
It totally is. It 100% is. You know, because we look at our RMM tools and how they evolved from 20 years ago. You know, all it is looking at event logs. That's all it is, right? And mostly Windows machines. You know, then we had the MIBs, you know, for the network gear, right? Which we never really understood any of that stuff. I mean, we kind of did, we kind of didn't. We relied on our vendors to give us templates, right, to manage their particular UTM or firewall, whatever they were. Yeah, but you look at SIM now we can look at all the logs and all the activity. It's your next evolution, if you will, which our traditional MSP RMMs don't do. So now we have a managed SIM vendor, right, with a SOC. So, you know, we bolt that on. We bolt on advanced malware protection. We bolt on vulnerability scanning. And then we got to figure out what to patch on top of that, right? Now that we have vuln scanning. So you have all these different tools, and the requisite knowledge of using those tools. There's overhead there, right? To get your engineers to understand.
I already feel frustrated.
Right, right.
There's a
No,
lot.
that's
That
exactly it.
single that single that single screen concept just went right out the door. We're talking about 50 screens.
Well, and that's what I mean by, a day in the life of an MSP. You know, we've started out very proactive with infrastructure management, and now we're very reactive because the only thing that we need, I shouldn't say only, but the major thing that we're worried about and thinking about are breaches. Like, where's the next one going to happen? And I think it's every 15 seconds someone's owned by malware globally. So we can't even close a ticket before there's another malware infection, right? Like, so um, we're just kind of behind the eight ball with that. So the idea of bringing vuln scanning, integrated patching, advanced malware, URL filtering, all of that together into a single agent, single console, that's literally what Acronis has done. So that's what I'm excited about.
Well,
Um,
okay, so let me throw a curveball at you. Do you drink the Kool-Aid with those guys out there that put the message out that, well, if you just go everything in the cloud, virtual desktop, Azure, AWS, whatever it is, that the security issue isn't the problem anymore? Do you agree with this?
Not really. I mean, there's still access control. Um, that's like saying my RMM is hosted somewhere. I'm totally safe. Well, that's been proven 100% wrong. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and if you take that tack, you're going to get owned. Um, so yeah, I wouldn't say that that's that there is no silver bullet when it comes to security. There isn't one. So if you put everything in the cloud, okay, great, but you still need access control. What if you don't have two-factor authentication? What if you don't have some of these things? You can't just rely on your cloud vendor. Um, I, I would argue at any point in time, there's no silver bullet. I think
So,
that,
so let's say you've drank the Microsoft Kool-Aid. You're totally like, E whatever, right? E infinity, right? Plan. You have all the stuff turned on. You're in virtual desktop in the cloud, Microsoft Office 365, virtual servers, the whole thing. The only thing the endpoint is just a window into the cloud, so to say. Do you still tell people, well, you still need to install software on these machines in the cloud because it's still not 100%? Is that the position?
well, how do you prevent? Okay, so you know, even Office 365 email filtering isn't going to get 100% of any phishing stuff, right? That was super. But so what happens when it's clicked? What happens when your web conferencing software is compromised? What happens when those things happen? If you don't have a layered approach, you're never going to see it until something bad happens, right? So yeah, I think it's a requisite um, to have a layered approach there, 100%.
Okay, so like bottom
I mean,
line
I
is,
suppose I suppose you
okay,
could take the tack that, I have a virtual desktop. If something happens, I'm just going to rebuild it. I'm just going to press reset. You could take that approach.
okay.
I don't know that it's the best approach. Um, we've seen VDI come and go over the last 10 years. I say come and go because, somebody will come out, we've got the best one. And the reality is they're extremely complicated to implement. Um, and so then they kind of go away. And I don't know that we've seen until now. We've seen with COVID, some of those vendors really make good inroads, right, with MSPs. Um, is that something that's going to last? I have no idea. I have no idea. I mean, I wouldn't pontificate that, but what I can say with the amount of time I've been around in the channel, I have seen that come and go. That's all.
Okay. So what's your playbook then, right? So you said that there's a layered approach, there's multiple components. There's frequency issues, there's reporting issues, there's monitoring issues. What is this vision you're talking about then? Because I feel like everybody has a different angle on this. I don't feel like any one vendor has it all. The diamond in the rough, if you would. I think there's still some thought of, well, no matter where my stuff is, whether it's this Microsoft Surface Book that I'm on right now, or if it's a Amazon virtual desktop, or if it's a hybrid, of some hardware, some cloud, I still have to install agents. I still need an RMM. I still need some sort of monitoring. Now what?
Right. I think that the vision is really true integration and automation. I think the industry of artificial intelligence is giving us an extreme leverage point in managing security as a whole, if you will, machine learning as well. So as these advanced technologies start to infiltrate MSP tools or come with new ones, because I haven't really seen our legacy tools embrace new technologies really on any level.
I think there's some tape in there, right? Like some plug-in, or like a little, at least it looks nice, but it may not do a lot.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a whole conversation in and of itself. If we look at our core tools, what innovation has there been? We've seen a ton of money be dumped into a lot of tools and a lot of companies. We've seen a lot of mergers and acquisitions happening. Um, you know, but where is the innovation part? Like where is the advancement of these tools? How come my basic RMM can't see an IoT device? Like, why not? And who's doing, why isn't anybody talking about that?
I
Why
don't.
do
Yeah.
I as an MSP have to go buy into another agent, another console to manage another device on my network? Um, you know, those are, again, that's a whole nother conversation, but it's a security question as well.
You're
you
not,
know?
you're not wrong. I mean, we're sitting waiting for the next, well, what is my investment? What's the next thing you're giving me, right?
Right.
I agree that there's been a little bit of stagnation there. And this is where a lot of vendors pop in to fill the gap, right? I mean, when there are events to go to, and I hope sometime in the future they come back. I mean, there's 100, 150, whatever, booths that you can walk down with your credit card. Please don't do that, by the way. I mean, go to the event, just keep your credit card in your pocket.
Right.
But there's a lot of people out there solving for needs that are missing, right?
Yep.
So, and I feel like there is a little bit of tool fatigue to a degree, right? Because I've walked down that aisle so many times and I've swiped enough times that I now am paying 15 different add-on solutions on top of what I have already, just to feel like I'm moving forward somehow.
Right. Well, and I think we're starting to see that with newer MSPs. You're starting to see, well, I mean, with your company, I'm sure you're seeing it too, but newer players in the market, or maybe different players in the market, could be one or the other, rather than your traditional MSP, like, dinosaur like myself that started 20 years ago. There's a model there. I think that model today either needs to evolve or is a little bit broken. If you look at a modern MSP, they're not necessarily bogged down by those old tools that we all thought were utterly necessary. Like you couldn't be an MSP if you didn't have these other tools. Today, I am seeing very light core tools and very specific other tools to solve specific problems. So, meaning security-centric tools, right? So, the need to manage let's say a Windows server in the way that we managed it 15 years ago has completely gone out the window. So that kind of speaks to well, if everything's in the cloud, what do we care about security for? Well, we probably don't care about CPU utilization anymore, or whether that exchange store is going to pop offline because I've run out of room. I don't have to worry about that anymore, because I used to have to worry about that as an MSP. What I have to
Mm.
worry about is breaches. Okay, so my mindset has to change. What I build my business on has to change. My core deliverable has to change. So
So
that's what I'm seeing newer MSPs do, being more agile, more profitable, and speaking to different issues than what we used to speak to with the end user.
fair enough. I will argue that sometimes there's an investment in building up of tools and scripts and stuff that you've built over time, right? That it's hard to flush down the toilet and start all over again.
Oh, I
Um,
get it. I get it.
so I can totally understand where somebody spent 10 years worth of script development into fixing all these different things. Now all of a sudden you're like, oh, let's start again. Red button, flush, and now we're looking at it from a different angle.
Right. But if you
Um,
don't need those scripts, why hang on to them? If it's not solving your modern problems, what do you need a whole bevy of scripts for? If they're not protecting your client.
I think it's all depends on where the MSP is in the model, right? Like, because
Yeah.
some people have made financial decisions that they can't back off from, right? And they're in it. And then there's other people who have kind of like pulled things in as somebody's raised their hand and said, "Can you do something about this?" Um, I think at some
Well,
point every business needs to zoom out and review what's going on and if they're in the right place. I agree with that.
yeah.
I think from a security standpoint, coming circling back to the idea, right? How do we become proactive again? Like I know there's investment in UTM's. I don't think the UTM's going away, but it's out there and it does its thing. I know it's tried to expand what that thing is, but I think it's not really gone too far. It just is what it is. I wouldn't recommend going from the UTM back to the, non-UTM router. I don't know if that's the right approach.
Right. No, I think you have to have security at the edge. You have to, whatever your edge is.
Right. And then, the I know antivirus is like the age-old argument, right? I'm going back to semantic antivirus days.
Mm,
But like even the newer ones, right? The Carbon Blacks and the Sentinel ones and all of these, newer things that have popped out. It's just the evolution to that, right? Something on the machine trying to deal with stuff that we already know about, right? So that's a little bit reactive, kind of, a little bit. But then, like to your point, there's all the other stuff that comes out, right? How often and how beneficial is penetration testing? How with all of these sites, especially people working remotely, are you pen testing everyone's house?
right.
Um, are you?
No. Oh, heck
So
no.
like,
My kids
okay,
probably are.
I mean, so like, what's the circle then, right? You painted a little bit of the picture, but like, let's say an MSP adopts into your vision. What is that? What is happening on a 24-hour basis that's helping them kind of move forward into, hey, I now have visibility that I didn't have before.
So are you asking specific about the Acronis platform, or just my opinions?
Well, no, I mean, throw Acronis in there if you think that they're solving that problem. But I think this bigger zoom out conversation is, if nobody's 100%, what are the core components that I really should be targeting on from an MSP perspective?
Yeah. Well, obviously, I mean, we all call it now the remote worker. Um, I, I think that's just a kind of a new COVID response term, right? But we've had disparate, disconnected devices for a very long time, and we haven't really managed them very well. Clearly, we haven't, with the proliferation of malware and all of that happening. So I think the core deliverable today, really could be summed up in protecting the data wherever that data resides. Um, but today, with the advances in bad actors and malicious things that are out there, data protection isn't just about backup. It
Mm-hmm.
must have a cybersecurity component to it, which I think, and I'm thinking about this, as you boil that down, what is that? It's being able to um, see things, quote unquote, see things as they happen in real time, find things that are hidden, whatever that might be, like a payload triggered attack of some sort, right?
Hmm.
Um, malicious links, all of those things need to be found and prevent the user, probably more likely than not, from triggering it, whatever it is. I mean, so I think you can really boil it down to data protection and cybersecurity. Like those go together. You can't think about them separately anymore.
I feel like the problem is, I'm sure we've all heard it. It's right in between the seat and the keyboard, right? The human being is the weakest link in this whole situation. Unfortunately, yeah, a little bit of training goes a long way, right? Hey, hover over the click, don't before you do it. If it looks funky, don't click, ask someone, right? I feel like a little bit of that helps the conversation, but at the end of the day, how you know how much is in reactive versus proactive, meaning, hey, yeah, if something happens, I need to be able to come back, right? Nobody's going to argue this point. And then the longer I stay out of commission, the worse it gets, right? So the rapidness of coming back is important in the big picture. I feel like the part that everyone feels is really missing is the in the moment visibility and what do I do, right? How do I know in the moment that there is a problem before it becomes, a reactive situation? And then what do I do when that happens to protect myself, right? It's like I'm on the football field, I see the guy coming, I want to stop this guy from getting into the end zone. Like, I think that's the part that everybody's feeling like there's a lacking.
I think again, and I'm going to touch back on a statement I made earlier about advanced technologies. Your AI and machine learning are huge assets in proactively preventing and knowing what's going on right now. Where are those technologies in our legacy MSP solutions? Are they being built in there? Are we seeing them come anywhere other than through maybe our advanced malware vendors? Because they're using artificial intelligence and machine learning. But where else are you seeing that? So I mean, again, there's no silver bullet, but some of these emerging technologies that I think we're very behind in integrating into our course tool sets, we, meaning vendors, have been behind in doing this, um, could really be helping MSPs uh, become and be more proactive and be more alert in the moment. There's no way any human being, I mean, and we have, other organizations that have massive SOCs all over the world, right? Multiple SOCs. You've got your carriers even fighting folks, at the edge of the edge, right? Um, People aren't going to be able to solve this problem. I think technology is going to be intrinsic in helping us be proactive and stay on top of it. I think it's about the only way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think people are scared of what, number one, cost for that, the technology. Number two, how hard is it to get their people up to snuff to be able to actively use the technology when it counts the most?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I know that there's the next obvious questions, but it's worth saying, or at least saying out loud. So let me, as we're kind of going into the tail end of this, do you feel the people who are like where from a pricing standpoint, right? I think this is the next big consideration. How do I go from I'm kind of layering stuff as I go to, hey, I'm security first, and where does how am I able to price that into my stack, right? Is it hey, I'm going to go to all my customers and immediately take my price point and increase it by 25%? Like, what's the range, that I'm going to be able to charge extra for this approach?
Well, that's been the biggest challenge, right? Okay, because basically MSPs have had three options in approaching or solving for the security problem, okay, as a whole. Um, Buy another MSP or MSSP, buy the expertise, okay, hire it in and build it, or partner. with a master MSSP. Those have been the three options, right?
Mhm.
All three of those options are expensive and add a layer of expense that in the short term, the end user has not been buying into yet.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. I mean, they just haven't. That's the reality. Now, the only one of those three options that will eventually make that price palatable is building your own. Okay.
Mm.
It's an expense up front. Okay. But if you're looking at the long term or the long haul, that expense will even out over time. So that's probably the long term solution for MSPs. The only way that an MSP is going to get there, though, is with modern tools. That's the only
Mhm.
way they're going to go. And it kind of goes back to my point. If I've got legacy tools that aren't solving modern problems, that's an expense to me as an MSP that isn't solving a client issue. And
Mm.
now I have to layer something else on top of it, which my client's not willing to pay for. So it's between a rock and a hard place, right?
It's a tough spot, right? Because, like I
Yeah.
said, if the financial investment's been made, now we're talking about a new thing. I feel like people are struggling to understand how to charge appropriately for this. Is it, like, hey, in some of the larger metros, you're seeing people now getting now closer from, before you were like, hey, $125, that seems really expensive. Now people are getting closer to the $200 per user per month if they're billing that way, right? Um, and then when you're talking about security with everything, that you really need to be doing, and affordability, these things don't tend to go in parallel correctly on the chart, right? So,
Right.
the security add another $50 per user, another $100 per user, another $10 per user. I feel like there's this scale that nobody knows what's exact, like whatever your customer's willing to pay. I guess it's the answer. I don't know.
Right.
What's your feeling on that?
Well, we argued about this from the beginning. Is it a cost plus model or is it a value-based pricing model? It's always been a value-based pricing model, always.
Mm.
Um, you can figure out the bits and bytes of what it's costing you per device, per vendor, per user, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. But with the proliferation of devices, I mean, it blew that model out of the water years
Mhm.
ago, years ago. I think in 2010, the average number of devices per person is 5. I don't
Mhm.
even know what it is today.
It's
Um,
like 8 or 9, yeah, for
right.
sure.
You can't really do a per device model, at least to the end user. So it's always been value-based pricing. We have to get mature enough to be able to make it outcome-based pricing. So you're paying for an outcome. You're not paying for a thing or a service. You're paying for a deliverable. And so the MSP's got to define what that deliverable is for the end user and charge appropriately for it. And, that's harder than a cost plus.
No, fair enough. Could you share with the audience where your the people who are ingrained in your model, ballpark, what are they able to get on the street with the value-based approach? Or is it just too complicated depending on how they sell?
Well, I don't know that it's too complicated per se, but I mean, uh, uh, North America's got the most MSPs, so maybe we've kind of focused there, right?
Okay, fair.
Um, the majority of our most profitable um, partners are doing value-based pricing. So in
Mm-hmm.
other words, it's not like I can't tell you, George, like, the average is $10 per device per month. Because they're not paying for device protection. They're paying for something else, something of more value, whatever that value is, whether it's I'm never going to lose my data, or my data is always recoverable, it's always authentic, it's always the original copy. Like that's what people pay for, and what they understand. So that margin. Let me speak to a margin perspective.
Okay.
Um, we've watched our margin shrink from best in class, used to be around 60%, okay,
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago. It's well under 12% now for the average MSP. Um, what MSPs are getting with value-based outcome deliverables is probably more around 35 to 40%.
Okay.
So, you know, that's a more realistic target if you're delivering those kinds of services, I think.
All right, no, that's fair. I mean, I would say, obviously we've all heard of the Paul Dipples and all these kind of accountability groups. I'm hearing best in class is anything 20% to the bottom line and above. Does that sound right? I think that's the number. So if people are able to get north of that, then they're in the green zone, right? They're already ahead of most of the people in the class.
Well, and you have to consider, I mean, what does it take to tread water in an IT services organization? You've got to be at 30% profit. You have to be just to
Mhm.
tread water. And that's not enough for R&D or adding new services or headcount or anything else. So, you know, we've got to figure out how to get beyond that point.
Fair enough. No, that's a good reality to put out in front of everyone. I think people don't realize that until they actually look at the real numbers. Closing thoughts, best advice for people on anything, coming into the rest of the last 6 months of the year here, right? I feel like, what's your words of wisdom to the community?
You know, it probably hasn't changed much over the 20 years, 26 years that I've been in the channel. Um, Listen to your client, whoever they are, because they will tell you exactly where to go with your business. They'll let you know exactly what services they need, what value they'll pay for. So keep that dialogue open because that literally, you don't have to be a genius to figure out this business model. You just have to really know who your client is.
It's really good advice, actually. Communication, right? For people who are doing technology work, sometimes it's
Right?
harder for some people than others, but I agree 100%. Well, Amy, I really appreciate you coming on. We're coming right on to the hour. We're fitted exactly in the time slot. And I appreciate everyone for joining and who will watch this in all the various formats. You'll find this recorded session on mspinitiative.com. I think on Facebook and YouTube. I mean, can't miss it. I appreciate everyone for taking the time. Again, Thursday will be our next session, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Amy, I hope I'm going to see you before October 25th in Miami.
Hope so.
Hope so.
Hope
Stay
so.
stay
Yep.
safe.
All right. You too. Thanks, George. I appreciate
You
you
got it.
letting me be here.
All right. Bye.
All right.